My name is Mark, and this is Zen Talk, and the topic is why Zen? So, there's a couple of reasons why people come to Zen. Um, Sometimes they come to seek enlightenment, which is kind of known as being the intuitiveness, the fearlessness, the loving and being spontaneous quality of being. Some people come to seek mental clarity, which is basically it's identifying patterns in their thinking, their speaking, and actions, and seeing where they're attached and holding onto mental and emotional baggage. And that's kind of a real big thing with a lot of people due to various traumas in their life or how they were raised. And so it's the recognitions of patterns and actions that have caused an incredible amount of suffering and chaos within their life. Some people come to Zen for the benefits, to reduce stress and anxiety, to enhance their emotional well-being, increase self-awareness, and improve their focus and concentration. And then others just come for a different perspective, to basically to feel liberated from the need to constantly improve themselves and be more connected with the world. And oftentimes the Zen message is, you are already complete. You are already the person or the being you need to be. You don't need to change or add or subtract anything. Okay, so in this next section here, I want to kind of go through what is recognized as the 7 pillars of Zen. And this is more or less reflective in a lot of modern Zen and a lot of Zen books and Zen thinking. And this is coming from 1971, so this would have been right around the time of the hippies, the counterculture, and when Zen was really kind of putting roots down in the West. So, first of all, Zen is known for simplicity or purity. And sometimes you see that, especially within the Asian cultures, the simplicity and purity of actions and within the arts. A lot of times people will see the tea ceremony, or they will see certain arts that reflect the simplicity and purity of mind. Asymmetry, sort of the balance point within, between emotions, between thoughts, between the extremes. The austere solemnity, which emphasizes the importance of abstinence and omission. So this is kind of getting into what people call the rule of negative space, or sometimes what is not there is more. And you kind of hear that within a lot, even within business, or you hear that within arts, especially with art. And you might even hear that within, people say sometimes, which they will, in a conversation, they will say things like, what you don't say is louder than what you do say, or sometimes silence is louder than the spoken word. So that is the recognition of that aspect of the mind and the arts. Naturalistness. And this would be more or less the recognition of natural law. Freedom from routine or habit, transcending the conventional. And this is probably more an Asian thing, of where culture and tradition are far stronger in the Asian societies than here in the West. Though we'll get into it that there was a time here in the West where culture and tradition was very strong. So, but when you can break free of, having to do what your father did, or certain cultural or society pigeonholes that you may have found yourself in or were put in, or the habits, of, well, everybody's doing it this way, so why don't you do it this way? Sometimes there's a freedom from that can be found. Tranquility or stillness is an aspect of Zen, and that kind of comes from all the above: the freedom of the habit or routine, the natural innocence, the simplicity and purity. In other words, if the mind is not struggling with all of these external constraints, one can find a tranquility and stillness within one's own mind. And that's part of that, going to clarity. And also, and lastly, a profound grace or a subtle grace. And that's kind of this feeling, this understanding that you're flowing within the naturalness or natural law of life. You're not feeling like it's artificial. You're feeling it's real. You're feeling the very profound and the very realness of being in the moment. All right, so in contrast, I want to go through the 7 pillars of Stoicism, and what's striking is that they're very, very much the same. So we have acceptance, which is accept what is outside of your control and stay in the present. Focus on what you can control. Try to maintain a calm and rational mindset in challenging situations, rather than becoming overwhelmed by emotions. So you hear the same thing in Zen, which is you can only control yourself. Virtue, responding to everything in life with virtuous mind, which is built on the 4 cardinal virtues of wisdom, courage, temperance, and justice. And you find very similar views within Zen and later within Buddhism. So fate, which is you accept the situation with grace. You acknowledge that external events happen regardless of your desires, and focus on the meaning you make of them. And sometimes you hear, people will say, well, shit happens. And it's not that you can change that. It's that it's really looking at how do you deal with that? How are you responding? How are you maneuvering yourself in that? And so we use grace and equality, and a lot of times that limits emotional imbalances, or going and making things worse, as people would say, when somebody flips out. Building resilience, which is reframing your perception of external events and focus on what is truly important. And this is getting back to the simplicity, in where you're just kind of ignoring or just not really caring too much about things that you have absolutely no control or involvement with, and you just focus on what's important, which is what's in front of you. Now, this one here, adversity can make us strong, which is approaching your emotions with a detachment and rationality, acknowledging your feelings without letting them overwhelm you. And this is, again, the equality, the balance that you're finding, which is, though something may have wronged you, you're not flipping out, or you're not going completely psycho over these things. You are approaching it with a rational mind and fully in control of yourself. And yes, expressing your feelings, but you're not letting them create an even worse situation. And sometimes you can, if you look at it from in a detached point of view, sometimes a solution can present itself within that view. And lastly, memento mori, which is meditate on your morality to inspire, motivate, and clarify and concentrate. Now, meditation in this particular aspect is contemplation. It is a focusing on a thought, a focusing on an action. It is being very aware or mindful of what you're doing. So let's look at Zen training here for a little bit. Zen training comes in different styles, and this is something that is not often talked about. I've mentioned it in some prior videos, but I'm going to go through it now. So the first style is the disciplinarian, which tends to be militaristic, requires conformity, and tends to be more towards the eradication of individuality. And this is, I would say, the most common kind of Zen training because it's the easiest kind. It's kind of the poor man's or the lazy way of Zen training, in where you're just going through like a karate club. You're just marching people through various forms and styles, and there really isn't a lot of work. The teachers, all the teachers have to do is, it's paint by numbers. They just run everybody through the same drills, and hope for the best. So when a person goes through, let's say a Zen training center, or they call them sessions, really they're just going through a set and a pattern of discipline through a disciplinarian style of teaching. And when they come out of that, they're hoping that, they have a little bit of insight into the nature of their mind or the nature of their character, or maybe to some of the things that are perplexing them or creating suffering. Now, you do see like if those of you who have went through military training, you say, well, what's the purpose of boot camp? Well, the purpose of boot camp is to sort of get you to do things the military way. And even though you as a person, as your own personality and your own individuality may have done things differently, you're kind of roped into and to conform to doing things the military way. And this is sort of what happens at the Zen centers or within these Japanese style of trainings. You're just grounded to do things in the way of the center or the way of the club. So the disciplinarian way tends to run in clubs, and you do things the club way. So the second way is the philosophical path, and this can exist within Zen centers alongside the militaristic disciplinarian. This tends to be the discussions, a more studious and contemplative environment. And I don't use the word meditation, I use the word contemplative, in mostly meaning you're focusing on koans, you're focusing on meanings, you're focusing on the karma and the baggage of your own mind, what is creating suffering and disease and various attachments that are causing emotional and mental blowouts. So the philosophical can get into the metaphysics of Zen, can get into, like I said, it's the discussions. A lot of times it revolves around koan study, it gets into case study. You'll definitely are going to be reading the recorded sayings of Zen masters and going through all of the various Japanese and Chinese writings. So this is where a lot of people kind of end up at. They may have started with the disciplinarian path, but they kind of then realize that, as a kind of a boot camp or a starter, that might have been necessary, but then they kind of graduate out of that into the philosophical. And the last style that I want to talk about is called the soulful, and this tends to be when you're working with somebody. So I put like work projects, and sometimes you will hear the term, their style is rubbing off on somebody. The more ignorant and hasty view this as absorption. We sit around the master and absorb. Well, that's not really the case. What it is that the teacher is sharing their soul, their nature, their character with everybody, and you pick that up in working with them on a work project, whether it be like furniture building or masonry or gardening or pretty much anything in where you are in direct working with somebody that is sharing their soul, sharing their Zen nature. This also, the soulful, comes through Q&A. Questions and answers, and you will see this often kind of commented and cited in the recordings of Zen masters, written down, or I don't think they were actually written down. I think they were just kind of created as fanciful fan fiction, but nevertheless they showed the being spontaneous and being intuitive and sort of the sharing of one's soul. And then lastly, there's mentorships, and where somebody is, it kind of goes to what George Lucas was kind of getting into within his Star Wars series. You have the master and the Padawan, as they called it, but it's a mentorship, and you still see that today, though hardly as it used to in the past, when somebody would become a mentor to somebody that would be an initiate. And today you hardly see this at all, but it is a method of Zen training to work one-on-one directly with a teacher, and you're kind of becoming like that person's shadow. You're always with your master. You live with them. You do things with them, and you learn from them. It's not a chess club, or it's not a book club, because you're doing this 24/7. All right, so let's get into meditation, because a lot of people come to Zen for meditation. And first, we just need to know that it is more than just sitting. That is probably like the most crude and the most the most, I would say, it's the most crude way of saying what meditation is. It's not just sitting. So there are two aspects of meditation. One would be the mental focus on a task or work, which we're getting into mindfulness. And this would, a lot of times, this is picked up in the arts. You might see it, like I said, with woodworkers and various other tasks in which requires a lot of concentration, a lot of focus, because to lose focus or lose concentration would lead to undesired results. So mental focus on a task in where you're just letting go of all the external garbage, all the external things that have nothing to do with what you're doing. And the next version of meditation is the thinking deeply or carefully about a subject. And this could be, again, a koan. It could be a case, as in a story or a happenings, from the recorded sayings of Zen masters. This could be focusing on a mental puzzle. This could also be looking deeply within your own self. What is it that you're hung up on? What is it that's just really, really, really bothering you? What is it that you're running away from? What is it that you're running towards? What is the various fantasies, and then what is the various realities? So it's a thinking about a subject or contemplation of a subject, and this is where we get into the contemplative. So this is really where we're going with meditation. This is what it's kind of getting at. This is when the Buddhist meditation, it's not blissing out or zoning out or trance. We're getting more into the knowing why you suffer, knowing why there is turbulence and within your life. What is it that's creating your problems? So within that, I need to discuss trance. And trance is defined as a half-conscious state characterized by the absence of response to external stimuli, typically induced by hypnosis or entered by a medium. Now, hypnosis can be done externally, like through words or through a moving object, and that's sort of like the swinging watch or look at the pen. And you could hypnotize somebody very quickly. And if I have hypnotized you with my moving finger, I apologize. Please wake up. You could also do it, like I said, through a medium, which both, you see that in a lot of Western spiritual centers. Sometimes it's called prayer, but in Zen and a lot of the Indian guru and Indian style teachings, they call it guided meditations. So let's talk about Zazen. Zazen is what they would call serene reflection, and it is the still sitting. It is, you'll sit down in a posture as described by the club that you may be attending or reading their books. They will have maybe a very stylized and ritualistic process of doing Zazen. And then they basically ask you to just allow your mind to relax without any particular direction, and you observe your thoughts coming and going without chasing them down. So overall, what are you really doing there? You're kind of falling into a self-hypnosis. And this is a intentional state of self-hypnosis. So when you're in a hypnotic state, what happens? Well, the consciousness kind of goes into, like I said, a half state, kind of in between waking and dream. In this state, reality kind of breaks down. And what is dream and what is real kind of merge. But furthermore, you're also, as we've seen like in the hypnotic shows, if you've ever been to a hypnotist show, you could see them on YouTube, and you can see that people who are in these hypnotic states are easy to suggest things to. They become suggestible, and where the hypnotist, isn't commanding them to do anything bizarre, but they're just making a suggestion, and the person who is in the hypnotic state just is like, okay, I can do that, because it's dreamy to them. It's like being in a dream, and the mind is like not very. The mind is in a suggestible state. But furthermore, self-hypnosis, or being in a hypnotic state, can allow for malicious use, as well as in implanting false memories, or implanting false memories is a good one. Creating a false sense of urgency, as well as breaking down one's rational and critical thinking, so that the person has defeated that mind, and it's just more or less going to go along with whatever they're told. And then we get into what's known as a post-hypnotic state, in where the person is out of hypnosis, though they are still highly suggestible. They are still very much in the post-hypnotic state. Is their critical and rational thinking is diminished and broken down, and they're still suggestible. Now, guided meditations, that is hypnosis. Pretty much anybody who has studied hypnotism will tell you that guided meditations is hypnosis. Same thing with guided prayers. So you see this both not only in Zen, but you see it in Vipassana. You see it in a lot of the Indian guru traditions. You see it in some Tibetan traditions, but you also see it in a lot of New Ageism, and some Christian churches use it. So going into a trance state, this is down here in yellow, going into a trance state is turning away from the world. You're suspending an engagement with it and entering into the twilight zone of self-enchantment. And remember that, self-enchantment. Okay, so trance and Zen, and this is kind of a dance, or a dangerous dance, as some people will tell you. So Buddhism calls trance dhyana, and it defines 8 stages of dhyana. You can look that up on the internet yourself. There's videos on it. A lot of modern Theravada, and especially the forest traditions, get into the dhyana trances, and this is something that is actually rather new to that particular sect. Keep in mind that the current version of the forest sects that we see in Thailand and then in Burma were actually coming, I believe, they actually developed from Ajahn Chah back in the 40s, from Mahatsi, from various other new style teachers. And that has been sort of the stage of Theravada for the last 80 years. Prior to that, Theravada was mostly just the recitation of sutras, the memorization, and the ceremonies. Dhyana was not really a part of it. So Zen has many terms for trance, and you will hear it in various manuals. One is the mirror mind. It'll be called Zazen. And even the term Zen itself is synonymous with being tranced out. And that's thanks to the hippie boomers that were in a zeal to seek out, all these alternative mindsets and states of mind. So Zen and being tranced out have kind of become synonymous. So when I say, "Oh, I study Zen," people assume that I study these tranced out states of mind, or that I go into a trance. And this is not Zen. Zen is not being tranced out. Okay, so with that particular line, we'll continue with hippie Zen, and this is again that boomer generation that rebelled against tradition. So this is the started with the beatniks in the 40s and 50s, which became the hippies in the 60s, and it was a movement, an alternative mindsets and alternative lifestyles. This was the drop in, drop out. This was the LSD era, the Cheech and Chong, smoke dope. This was the era in where a lot of the Indian gurus were starting to make an appearance, especially with the free love and the sort of do what you will. We saw the rise of a lot of alternative religions, like I said, mostly Indian, but we also saw the rise of paganism, and various other groups formed out of that, Wiccan and some of the modern day witches. So from that, an exploration, a rebel against tradition. And one of the things that, when you ask, okay, so what was going on in the 30s and 40s? Well, young men and women were placed in very stereotypical roles of what they were to do and what was expected of them. Young women were expected to, get married and have children, and young men were expected to work and provide for their wife and children. And this is before the corporatism and the kind of industrialization that we see today, in where a lot of young men were going to go do the businesses that their fathers and their grandfathers were doing. So if your father was a plumber, it was pretty much assumed you were going to be a plumber. And there wasn't a whole lot of big business or multi-billion-dollar corporations. I think the biggest ones you had was the airlines, and maybe IBM was starting to form. But pretty much everything was small businesses, farms, and things that you would do, your family was doing. It could have been a grocery store, a small grocery store. It could have been a delivery business. It could have been, some sort of craft, some sort of woodworking, whatever. And the same was also with, everybody was kind of doing the same politics. Everybody was kind of doing the same religion. So this 60s. And there's a lot of documentaries on YouTube that talk about why the 60s, why the hippie and rebellion started. So we were literally looking at, there was a rebellion against tradition, and Zen was just part of that rebellion. It was brought out, it was highly invested by rebellious youth to turn to different cultures or different states, different views, to end or to seek something different than what they were expected to do. How funny though, yet, and I put down here, yet in the end they embraced the very traditions they rebelled against as their youth. And that's sort of the epitaph of the boomer generation, is they became what they rebelled against. So I think I want to conclude this video, and I think it's worth again stating that Zen is not a club. Um, Zen is not a religion. Um, Buddhism is a religion because it is an adherence to the belief of the Four Noble Truths as absolutely real, and the Eightfold Path as the way. Now, Zen is a finger pointing to Buddhism sometimes, but it doesn't have to be. Zen can be its own thing. And it has, you can have Zen Christians, you can have Zen Buddhists, you can have Zen that is completely non-religious. But Zen is towards, it is, Zen is it's its own thing. It is not a club. So in saying it's not a club, it is also not cultural appropriation. If somebody says, "Oh, I study Zen," and then people kind of just suddenly associate that with, ancient Japanese culture or anything Japanese, that's cultural appropriation, and that's not what Zen is. It has nothing to do with that. And then lastly, Zen is not a state of trance. Because that's, somebody says, "Oh, dude, you're all Zen." Well, that kind of just means tranced out, or somebody who's just indifferent, or is not really in the moment. Maybe they're just sort of, in their own mind, off on some mind trip. Who knows? But yet people will say that, "Oh, dude, you're just in some Zen state," meaning of trance, because that's kind of what has happened. Is Zen has been associated with states of mind that are tranceful, but you can't call those things Zen because that's more out of ignorance or out of misuse and misterming of Zen. So Zen actually points to natural law, the spontaneity of being in the living moment, or intuitiveness. And a lot of people, when they start to they stick around Zen long enough, they start to see this. They start to see that Zen has nothing to do with, being in a club, or, with a Roshi, or with any ecclesiastical orders, or marching around a zendo or anything like that. It's not a religion. It's when people say, "I study Zen Buddhism," what they mean is Zen and Buddhism, because Zen is just a conduit, not a religion. So when people say, "Well, they can start to see that Buddhism really is a different thing, is the religion. Zen may just be the door that they've gone through, not necessarily a religion at all." Zen is not cultural appropriation. People may see the roots of Zen from Japan or China, but then after a while it becomes very clear that the mind of Zen, the qualities of Zen, the teachings of Zen has moved through those cultures and has taken on the cultural appearances of those people and those places, but it's not those people or places. So when a student is doing things the way they did it in Japan, or they are doing it in Japan, it is not necessarily Zen. And it's just saying, well, you're just doing it in a way that somebody in Japan would do it. So, what is that? And that's the same thing with the robes and all the other accessories. You don't need those to study Zen. Zen can be wherever you're at and with whatever you're doing and whatever culture. And that's the beauty of Zen. It's not dependent on any cultural interpretation or appropriation. And the last part is, again, Zen is not a state of trance. You don't see that, because if Zen was really about sitting down on a cushion and zoning out and detaching from the living aspect of this world, the spontaneity and this moment, then why is that just not even stated in the recorded sayings of Zen masters? And I challenge you to even find that, because you won't. That I've pointed out in other videos that the old Chan masters really had a dim view of these kind of trance practices. And even if you go into other traditions, such as the Tibetan practices, they're more into mindfulness of doing the ceremonies with the movements and the chanting. When you go into pre-Theravada, pre-1940s Theravada, it was all about the chanting and the mindfulness. And you look at the newer variations, like Vipassana is a new religion. That only appeared on the scene in the 50s and 60s. That's all about trance. That's a whole new thing. The same thing with the current forest monks, or the Dharmagut. That tends to be more about dhyana, the trance again. So these various groups or these clubs flirt on and off with trance. And it is likely that in the future these groups will reform, and they'll start going back to the mindfulness and the chanting and the living moment, or the intuitiveness of what's happening. So this is my conclusion, and I thank you very much for putting up with my talk. If you're a follower of my channel, thank you for subscribing, and if you have not subscribed, I encourage you to do so.